My story about leaving my wife due to her obsession with aesthetic. You might find it hard to believe when I say that I left my wife for what seems like a small reason, but one that ultimately drained me. My entire life, my family, even the best moments, all had to match the aesthetic that she set. Let me share this emotional story with you and explain why I decided to walk away. My story with Sarah started like a dream. We met through mutual friends, went on fun dates, and slowly developed a deep love for each other. Sarah was always someone who cared about appearances, but I never saw that as an issue. She just wanted everything to look nice when guests came over, and I understood that. At first, everything was fine. We had a cozy home, simple family moments filled with love, and everything seemed perfect. On weekends, we'd enjoy dinners together, clean the house, and cherish little moments, like when our daughter spoke her first words. That life seemed like perfection. But things started to change when Sarah created an Instagram page for moms. At first, I thought it was just a small hobby, like every other mom out there. But soon after, her following exploded, from a few thousand to 400,000. Every photo she posted was meticulously curated, and every item in our house had to match perfectly. At first, I felt a bit uncomfortable with how our house was becoming less practical, but I thought it would only be temporary, and she'd eventually return to a more realistic way of living. However, that didn't happen. She began to care more about how things looked than about the feelings within our family. The photos had to be perfect, and everything had to be arranged artistically. Everything had to look like it was taken straight out of Instagram. She began stressing out when a small object was out of place, and I couldn't even put a cup on the table without being scolded. It felt like I was living in a museum where everything was for display. Nothing could be touched. And that's when I started to feel suffocated. We no longer enjoyed genuine moments together. Everything became about appearances. Our family photos were no longer treasured memories. They were simply staged images meant to look good, with no real love or connection behind them. I started realizing that I couldn't live in a world where everything had to be perfect, but without any real emotion. As Sarah spent more time on Instagram and her photography projects, everything in our home began to lose its natural feel. What I once saw as simple, loving family moments became something judged through the lens of an aesthetic. This was especially evident as our daughter, Ellie, began to grow older and develop her own interests. I could see the shift in Sarah's attitude toward everything in the house, especially toward our daughter's room. Ellie's room used to be simply decorated but full of toys, stuffed animals, and cute paintings, things that any child would love. But now, Ellie's room had become a place filled with neutral tones like beige and cream, with no room for colorful toys that other children would have. I couldn't understand why a child couldn't have the toys she loved just because they didn't fit into the overall design of the house. One day, my mom took Ellie shopping and let her pick out a gift. Ellie was so happy when she chose a dollhouse from a TV show she loved. But when we brought the gift home, Sarah was furious. She said there was no place for it in Ellie's room and even asked Ellie to leave it at Grandma's house. I felt heartbroken seeing Ellie's disappointment, but I could do nothing except quietly agree with Sarah's decision. I began to realize that, with Sarah, everything in our life had to meet a certain standard of perfection. This wasn't just about the living space, but about how we raised our child. She didn't just forbid Ellie from having toys she loved. She also wouldn't allow us to enjoy the little moments of life. Every time I wanted to do something natural with Ellie, like building a blanket fort, Sarah would oppose it because those blankets had been folded in a specific way for a perfect picture. I felt like I no longer lived in a real family. We weren't ourselves anymore. Everything seemed trapped in a perfect mold, and I started feeling like a stranger in my own home. The tension in our family grew, and I felt I couldn't continue living in a space where emotions and freedom were no longer valued. As the conflicts in our house became more frequent, I started feeling like I was living a fake life. The important moments in our family weren't genuine, happy moments anymore. They had become meticulously planned scenes for Instagram. This became especially clear when our daughter, Ellie, reached an important milestone in her life. She learned to walk. This should have been a beautiful moment to celebrate as a family, but Sarah turned it into a battleground. That day, we were all in the living room when Ellie suddenly took her first steps. My mom, I, and Sarah were all there, but Sarah couldn't enjoy the moment. She was only focused on making sure the video looked perfect. When I put my cup down on the table near Ellie, Sarah immediately yelled at me to move it. She was worried that the cup would ruin the perfect look of the video and would need to be edited before posting. Her words stunned me. How can I post this picture when everything around it isn't perfect? I couldn't understand why such an important moment was considered unworthy just because of a cup on the table. I felt like I couldn't be myself anymore. I just wanted to enjoy the moment of Ellie taking her first steps, to feel the joy and pride. But all I got was criticism about something so insignificant. It made me feel useless, unable to please my wife with even the simplest things. We had a heated argument after that. Sarah said I was selfish, that I didn't understand the pressure she was under to maintain a perfect image on social media. But I couldn't understand why the image mattered more than genuine emotions, the connection within our family. Our family's precious moments couldn't be replaced by edited, perfect photos. Every time I tried to explain how I felt, Sarah would ignore me, insisting that there was no problem with her, that it was just how she lived and worked. She never saw her own issues, never saw the stress and exhaustion I was enduring. I began to realize that while Sarah might have a perfect life on Instagram, the reality of our life was filled with conflict, pressure, and a lack of emotional connection. I couldn't continue living in a marriage like this, where everything had to be perfect to be accepted. Our real emotions, our family moments, were slowly being pushed aside just to please an image created from false perfection. As the days went by, my exhaustion grew, and the unshared emotions made me feel more distant from Sarah. I realized that every criticism, every demand for perfection, wasn't just an issue of aesthetics. It had become a deeper issue about how we viewed family and life. The precious moments, the time we spent together, were now being ignored to serve an image that didn't truly reflect the reality. After every argument, I felt empty. Every time I tried to share my feelings with Sarah, she'd dismiss it, saying it didn't matter. It seemed that in Sarah's eyes, only Instagram was important. She didn't understand that I was tired of the perfect image and tired of not being able to be myself in my own home. I couldn't simply place a cup on the table without worrying about whether it would ruin the picture, or build a blanket fort with Ellie without worrying that those blankets would mess up the perfect arrangement. I felt like I had become a part of a play no one could escape from. One day, after Ellie had learned to walk, I wanted to celebrate her achievement in a simple family way, with a little gathering of just the three of us. But Sarah stopped me, saying, "We need to clean up and make it tidy before inviting guests." Her words hit me like a slap. I couldn't understand why that moment was being overlooked just because the arrangement wasn't perfect. The feeling that everything had to be perfectly neat and beautiful, like a picture, made me feel like I was living in an unrealistic marriage. After moments like this, I started thinking about a decision I never wanted to make, but eventually, I couldn't continue this life. I suggested that Sarah seek therapy to find a balance between maintaining an image and preserving the real family values, but she refused. Sarah insisted that there was nothing wrong with how she lived, and when she refused to acknowledge the problem, I understood that I couldn't change her, and I couldn't change how she viewed our life. That was when I realized that I couldn't continue living in a relationship where I no longer felt like myself. I decided to leave this marriage, not because I didn't love Sarah or didn't cherish the memories we had, but because I couldn't keep living in a relationship full of tension, where everything had to be perfect, and I felt like I was losing myself. When I made the decision to leave Sarah, the feeling wasn't as relieving as I had imagined. In fact, it was a mixture of pain and regret. I couldn't deny that we had shared happy moments, cherished memories when we were in love. But I also couldn't deny that the feeling of carrying a fake life, where everything had to fit a perfect image, had gradually drained me. This decision wasn't easy. Even though I couldn't bear the feeling of being a stranger in my own home anymore, I still felt regret for the years we had spent together. Sarah was someone I once loved and shared everything with, but now, she had become someone I couldn't understand, someone living in a fake world I couldn't be part of. I knew she loved her work on Instagram, and I knew she wanted everything perfect, but I could no longer be a part of that. I decided to move out, to say goodbye to the home I had shared with Sarah and Ellie. Although I knew I needed space to find myself, I couldn't help but feel the pain of no longer being a complete family. I worried about Ellie's future, wondering if she would understand my decision, if she would feel the lack of love from both her parents. But I also knew that if I didn't leave, I would never be able to be a true father, a true husband in this family. When I began living on my own, I felt a strange sense of freedom. No more pressure to make everything perfect. No more worrying about whether every little action I made might ruin the perfect image Sarah wanted to create. I didn't have to worry about whether the cup on the table would ruin the photo, or whether Ellie could play freely in her room without being criticized. I could just be myself, without living according to an Instagram-made model. However, deep down, I couldn't deny the regret. I missed the days when we were a family, when Sarah and I shared joyful moments. I missed seeing my daughter's smile when she first walked, even though it wasn't captured in a perfect video. I missed the feeling of sitting together at the dining table, talking about simple things full of love. Those moments had now become the past, and I couldn't change anything. Even though I left, I understood that this decision was necessary. I couldn't live a life where I wasn't happy, and I hoped, in the future, Sarah would realize that perfection couldn't replace love, connection, and authenticity in a family. After leaving Sarah, I slowly began to find peace in the days I lived alone. No more facing daily conflicts about how to make the house perfect in her eyes. No more keeping silent when I felt criticized for the little things. I started to feel like I could breathe again. While there were moments I felt relief from no longer having to live under the pressure of maintaining a perfect image, I couldn't deny the feeling of loneliness and loss. Every time I looked at pictures of Ellie, the family photos from before, my heart ached. I missed the mornings when Ellie would run to greet me, the afternoons we played together in the park. I missed Sarah. Even though we had our issues, she was still the person I once loved. But I also knew that if I stayed, I would never be able to be myself in that marriage. We were no longer a real family, just an image that was beautiful but empty. Gradually, I began to accept and integrate into my new life. I spent time for myself, doing things I hadn't had the chance to do before. I read books, went on walks, and even joined activities I had neglected for many years. While nothing could replace those family moments, I felt like I was starting to reconnect with a part of myself that had been lost for so long. A part of me still hoped Sarah would understand my decision. I had encouraged her to seek help from a professional, but I knew that, no matter what she realized, my decision had become part of my growth and self-awareness process. I couldn't keep enduring a life where I had to try to become someone I wasn't. I also hoped Ellie would understand and forgive me when she grew up. I loved my daughter more than anything, and I wanted her to have a life full of freedom, not bound by standards I couldn't follow. I didn't want her to live in a family where everything had to match a perfect image without real love. Still, I had learned an important lesson. Perfection isn't the most important thing in life. Love, truth, and those precious moments together are what truly create value. I hope, someday, Sarah will realize that real life doesn't need to be perfect, but real, honest, and meaningful.